everybody, my name is Mars. You can call me MG if you would like, and today I have for you my November wrap-up and December TBR. We're at the last one of the year, the last one in this format because I'm going to be changing things up a little bit in the new year. Still playing the same game, but just, like I said, switching things up. But that is nothing we have to deal with here. We don't even have to deal with my December TBR just yet because first, we have to talk about all of the books that I read in the month of November, so let's just get into that. The first thing that I picked up was volume 16 of Chainsaw Man, and I had a great time with this. Chainsaw Man is one of my favorite series, and this one, not gonna lie, even for Chainsaw Man, which is a weird series, this was a bit of a weird volume, but I still really enjoyed it. I love this series. I love all of the characters. I think it's just a wacky good time, so I am happy to have gotten to this. I feel like it took me a while. This volume came out in English like a couple months ago, I think, and now I have to wait a couple more months for volume 17, so sad, but this one was a good one. Then I read The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst, and I gave this an 8 out of 10. I thought it was really cute and cozy, which is kind of the intent. There were definitely some things that I thought could have been executed a little bit better. I was confused on some things that we never got any explanation for, but overall, I thought this was just a nice, fun time, and I think I'll read from this author again if she writes more cozy fantasy because I really enjoyed the writing style, so definitely a highlight of the month. It was so lovely and a nice little reprieve from everything. And after that cute, cozy little fantasy, I read some really hard-hitting books, and that is the Earthseed duology by Octavia E. Butler. This is Parable of the Sower, book 1, and then book 2 is Parable of the Talents. I gave Parable of the Sower a 10 out of 10. It's on my list of favorite books that I've read this year because it was absolutely amazing, a great time. Parable of the Talents I enjoyed slightly less for personal reasons, just some things about it that weren't to my taste, but it was still a really, I feel weird saying good time because it's not, but the word that I've been using to describe it is cathartic. I did vlog my reading of these two books, so if you want to see more in-depth thoughts about them, definitely check that out. I think it's the video coming out on my channel after this one, or maybe before. It's either the one coming out right before this video or the one right after. Either way, check it out if you want to know my thoughts on this in more depth. Then I picked up volume 1 of the manga Hanakimi for You in Full Blossom, and it was my intent to read the entire series, 23 volumes of it, but I read this first one and the art style isn't really for me. This is an early 2000s series, I believe, late 90s, early 2000s, and that was an era of manga where the art style just did not vibe with me whatsoever. I'm not a fan. And also, the story is interesting, but not interesting enough for me to keep up with it. I might check out a couple more volumes in the future, give it a little bit more of a chance, but for now, just the one volume was fine. Like, it was okay, I just wasn't super into it. Next up, I read The House of Hades by Rick Riordan. This is book 4 in the Heroes of Olympus series. I have this really awful exclusive Walmart edition sticker that I have yet to take off the cover, even though I bought this over a decade ago? When did this book come out? I genuinely don't remember. This was 2013. Just over a decade ago I've had this book and I've yet to take the sticker off the cover. But I loved this book. I had a great time. I think this might be my favorite book in the Heroes of Olympus series because it is a lot of Percy and Annabeth, and they're my favorite characters. They're my favorite fictional couple of all time. I just had a fantastic time reading this. And then next month, whether it gets on my TBR or not, I'm going to be rereading The Blood of Olympus, which is the conclusion to this series, and I absolutely cannot wait. I've had a great time with my reread of the Percy Jackson / Heroes of Olympus books. Then I decided to finish out some series. So the first series that I finished out was the Fallen Isles trilogy by Jodi Meadows, and this was the book When She Reigns. And I gave this a 7 out of 10. I thought it was good. It was definitely better than book 2. I wasn't a big fan of book 2, but not nearly as good as book 1, which I absolutely loved. It did redeem itself a little bit from the slumpy middle book syndrome, but it wasn't the greatest conclusion I could have hoped for. I just wanted more from it than I got. So I don't know if I'm gonna read from Jodi Meadows again, but I did moderately enjoy this trilogy. Like I said, I loved the first book, but the other two were just okay. Then I finished the Daevabad trilogy by S.A. Chakraborty, and the last book that I had to read for it was The Empire of Gold, which I loved. I thought this was so good. This is another series where I wasn't a huge fan of the middle book after absolutely loving the first book, but this final book in the series was just amazing. I had a really great time with it, and I definitely will read more from S.A. Chakraborty. I know she has I think it's a short story collection that's set in this same world and follows some of the characters, and I've heard that it's really, really good, so I will definitely be checking that out at some point. And the last series that I finished out was the Gold Seer trilogy by Ray Carson. I read Into the Bright Unknown, and I gave this a 10 out of 10. This was so good. I think it's like maybe half a notch below books 1 and 2, but like all three of the books in the series were a 10 out of 10 for me. I am obsessed. I want physical copies to put on my shelf because I just love them so, so, so much. The reason why this is slightly below the other two in the series is just because it has less action to it. I feel like it was a lot more emotions, which is great. I still loved it. Like, I gave this a 10 out of 10. I just, if anything, would complain about the fact that I wanted maybe one or two more actiony type scenes, but still, I had a great time and I loved this book so much. And continuing on with the books that I loved so, so, so much, we have An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson, which was a reread. I read this for the first time last fall and wanted to reread it for the autumn season because one of the main characters is the prince of the autumn court of the Fae. I do think after this reread that it is a little bit more spring vibes than autumn because they spend a lot of time in the spring court, but I don't care. I'm still going to consider this an autumnal book, and I loved this. If anything, I loved it more than I loved it last year, and like I was singing its praises last year after the first time I read it, so I just appreciate it that much more. It was so good. I will read anything that Margaret Rogerson writes. Like, she could write the back of a cereal box, and I'd be like, yes, give me a copy. Like, that's how much I love her works. Then I picked up Sadie by Courtney Summers, and I read it physically while listening to the audiobook, which was a great time because this follows two timelines, and one of the timelines is like written normally, and the other timeline is written in the format of a podcast script. So having the audiobook for those moments was a good idea. The audiobook is full cast, which was great. I loved everyone's performance, so I just felt very engrossed in this. This was a lot harder hitting than I expected. Like, I knew going into it was going to get quite dark because we follow the main character Sadie, who goes missing after her sister is murdered. So, like, I knew we were dealing with some heavy topics. I just didn't expect it to get quite so heavy and dark, but I still really enjoyed this and want to check out more of Courtney Summers' works. And going back a few minutes to when I said that I would read anything that Margaret Rogerson writes, I then picked up Mysteries of Thorn Manor by Margaret Rogerson. This is the sequel to the book Sorcery of Thorns, which I read back in April, May, sometime around then. And I really, really loved it, and I was like, dang, I have to get to this sequel novella, and I never did until right now, and I'm kind of glad that I waited because it is a wintry setting, so it was very fitting for right now when it is getting quite cold. And I gave this a 10 out of 10. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was perfect, absolutely no notes. It was amazing, and I will reiterate my statement that I will read literally anything that Margaret Rogerson writes. After that, I picked up I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid because I wanted something short and horror. So I actually made a list of 5 short horror books that I was interested in, and I sent it off to both of my sisters and my best friend, and all three of them picked this one because they thought it sounded the most interesting, and it was certainly interesting. The whole time, like I'd say the first like 80%, maybe 75, 80%, I'm like, okay, when's the shoe gonna drop? Like something is going to happen. And then it's like a switch gets flipped and everything happens all at once at the end, and you're like, holy crap, what did I just read? But in like the best way. It was insane, and I'm really glad that I read it. So I'm kind of still in that horror mood because of it. Hopefully, I can get a couple of those kind of books on my December TBR, or if not, I'll just keep reading some because between this book and Sadie, I'm like, wow, I'm in the mood for darker books. After that, I picked up Purgatorio by Dante. Not this whole big thing, this is a bind up of the Divine Comedy, but I read the middle section, so you can see my bookmark is still in it. And I read this because I've read Inferno in the past, but then sometime over the summer I decided to reread it and finally move on with the rest of the Divine Comedy. And I thought it was good. I really enjoy this translation. This is the Longfellow translation. That's who it was. I'm like, I know it's a really famous poet, but I can't think of his name. This is the Longfellow translation, and I really enjoy what he's done with the material. But Purgatory itself, just as a story, wasn't as good as Inferno. I mean, it's not as iconic, but it's also just the same issue that I had with Into the Bright Unknown, which again, not really an issue, just like one little tiny critique, is that it's a lot less actiony than what came before it. So Inferno is very tense, very actiony, and then Purgatory, it's a lot of Dante walking around, talking to people, walking around, falling asleep and having a dream, walking around, talking to more people. And like it's still good, it just could have been better, in my opinion. But I do plan to read Paradiso, Paradise, in December, whether it gets on my TBR or not, so that I can finish up this gigantic bind up and take it off my TBR cart because that thing is at maximum capacity and this would clear up a lot of space for other books. And finally, the last book that I have to talk to you about for this portion of the video for my November wrap up is Ink Death by Cornelia Funk. Another chunky book. This time I read the whole thing though, because it's one big story, and I loved it. I think this is my favorite reread of it. Like, I don't think I appreciate it as much in previous reads and rereads, but this time around I feel like every single plot line was so well done. If anything, I think they might have been able to be slimmed down a bit. So since this is almost 700 pages, I do think here and there little details could have been taken out to make this not quite so chunky, but I don't think there's anything that could have been removed completely outright. And I just had a great time. I love this series. I love this world. And then after this, the only thing left for me to read is the new release. It's called The Color of Revenge, and it follows one of the antagonists from this series on a revenge quest, and I'm so excited. I cannot wait to get my hands on it. That is something I am hoping to get as a Christmas gift. So I probably won't read it in December, but 2025, it's definitely a priority for me to read it. But that is all of the books that I read in the month of November. So now we can move on to December and try and squeeze in all the books that I want to read by the end of the year. Alright, here we are with my deck of cards. I'm going to split it here, sure, why not? And we're going to pull 3 and see what I get. And then I will look at the prompts, pick books, and come back to tell you about them. But the cards that I'm pulling are the 3 of Monstrosities, the Fiend, just the Fiend, no number. Well, I guess the number is 1. And finally, the last card for an official TBR of 2024 is the Blood Hunter. Ooh, I love this card. I think the like ribbony blood design is so beautiful, and the way it like has gold foiling as it crosses over the person's silhouette, stunning. All of the cards are stunning, but I really like that one a lot. Anyway, like I said, I'm going to go look at my prompt list and pick some books, and then come back and tell you about them. Okay, friends, I'm finally back. It didn't take me long at all to pick the books for these prompts, but I was hit with pretty much every interruption you could think of, so it's been like half an hour since my last clip because I had to deal with a bunch of stuff. But I'm here to talk to you about these books. So, the first card that I pulled was the Three of Monstrosities, and the book that I am going to pick for this, because the prompt is Gothic horror, is Castle of the Cursed by Romina Garber. I have read from Romina Garber before. I read Zodiac, which is technically by Romina Russell, but I think Garber's her married name. And I read Zodiac years and years and years ago. It's actually on a list of books that I want to reread to see if I'm actually still interested in it because it was so long ago that I read it. But I figure in the meantime, I can try some of her more recent works to see if I enjoy her as an author that way. So Castle the Cursed is one that I don't know much about. I just know that it's gothic horror, and that's good enough for me because it's a genre that I love and it's an author that I think I enjoy. After that, I pulled The Fiend. The prompt for this is a standalone, and the book I'm going to go with is The Immortalists by Chloe Benjamin. This is historical literary fiction, magical realism, sort of. It follows a group of siblings after they have their fortunes told. I think they're told when they're gonna die or something like that, and it like unfolds over the next 50 years following these siblings. And I got this at a yard sale a few weeks ago. Actually, it was like a week and a half ago at most. It was very recent, and the cover is stunning, and I'm just very excited. I've been thinking about it since I got it, so I'm glad that I got to put it on this TBR. The third and final book for this official TBR, I pulled The Blood Hunter because it's a class card. There are two prompt options, and the book I picked actually kind of fits both. So I could either pick my most recent purchase or a cover buy. And I went to a library book sale. I actually went twice. They were open for 3 days, and I went the first day and the third day, and I bought 5 books during each day. So technically, any of those 10 books I would count as the most recent purchase, but this is one that I bought on the second day that I went, so it is like the most recent purchase for me, and that is Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco. This cover is stunning. If it was the original cover, I don't know if I would have picked it up, because even though it's a series that I have been interested in for a while, I hate the original cover. This is like a new edition of it. I think it just started being printed this year, so I am excited because this cover is gorgeous and the rest hopefully will look just as pretty, assuming I enjoy the book. This is also a historical book, but this is much more fantasy than The Immortalists, I think. So we are definitely going for a historical vibe this month, which I'm not mad about. And this is about a girl who tries to solve the case of Jack the Ripper, and some fantastical, paranormal, supernatural-ish things happen, maybe? I don't actually know a lot of the details, but that is my pick for The Blood Hunter. And with all that said and done, I can finally bring this video to a close. It feels like I've been filming it all morning, but I am so excited for my December reads, all the ones that I got on this TBR, but also everything else that I want to read. If my calculations are correct, out of the entire list of books that I'm hoping to read in the month of December, I will be starting 5 series, which is a lot, but I'll also be finishing 2 series, so it kind of balances out a little bit, maybe? Not really, but I'm going to lie to myself and pretend that it's fine. But now, I'm gonna go and stop babbling at you guys. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a big thumbs up. You can subscribe to my channel for more content, and that way I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, everyone.